Hey, it's Jeremy from Jeremy.net. I'm a comic book artist, writer, creator, self publisher, and I share my creative process here with you online. If you'd like to get additional bonus live streams twice a month, where we dig into some of the best art books around and try to suck out all the knowledge we can, you can become a Patreon subscriber for as little as $2 a month. You also get access to a digital archive where you can read my comic books online and access to a Patreon exclusive Discord server where we share tips, process, feedback, work in progress, encouragement, art tools, and more. Just general online shop talk, more of what we have going on here, but taking it out into the Discord server. So all that for as little as $2 a month. There are higher tiers for higher rewards, but there's descriptions. There's a link in the description for this video. Head on over and check it out. If you would like to get a free digital sketchbook, work in progress animated GIFs delivered right to your inbox, blog posts about what I'm reading, what I'm watching, what's inspiring me creatively, you can sign up for my free monthly newsletter at newsletter.jeremy.net. That's newsletter.gerimi. And if you'd like to purchase physical copies of my comic books, or if you read digitally on Kindle, you can go to amazon.jeremy.net. That'll forward you to my Amazon author page. You can pick up books like my first graphic novel, Eye of the Gods. It is a psychological thriller about a man cursed with visions he cannot control. It's a self-contained, done-in-one story. You can also pick up my most recent comic book project, Morning Star. Morning Star tells the story of Lucifer's fall from heaven, but as a Western. It's an 8-issue series. Volume 1 contains issues 1 through 4. Volume 2 contains issues 5 through 8. Both volumes have extensive back matter, script excerpts, thumbnails, character designs, page layouts, photo reference, and more. I basically show you how I put the entire comic book together. And on the home page of my YouTube channel, there are book flip-throughs. You can actually look inside the book and check it out before you pick it up. All right, thank you so much. Let's get into it. Let's get into some art making today. So, I see HJ Mars is already in the chat. Good to see you. And HJ Mars is our special our special focus for this episode. He kindly shared some artwork with me and asked for some feedback on a character design for a superhero character he has, and I said, sure, let's bring it in here, and we're just gonna take a look at his character design and go through it, see if there's places we can punch it up, enhance the character. So thank you so much for sharing your work and allowing me to share it with our audience and talk about it. So thanks, HJ. And by the way, I'm on the screen at the bottom. I've got his Instagram handle here, so it's the HJ Mars on Instagram, and I will put a link to his Instagram in this video afterwards. I didn't have a chance to do it beforehand, but you know, we'll definitely send people to check out your work. So this character is called the Red Tail. His name is Gavin Gawain. So he's a bird-themed character. And one of the things that I started with after I read, HJ gave me a pretty thorough bio of the character and his background. He's a young man who's orphaned. He has the power to communicate with birds. He can compel them to do things, but prefers to simply communicate, request, have them as allies. So he's kind of like an Aquaman for birds, if that makes sense. So if you feel, and if at any point I'm mischaracterizing your character, HJ, please feel free to correct me in the chat. But anyway, and let's see here. HJ does say, I'm interested to see what you do with the mask because I had a lot of trouble in deciding what to do with that. Well, you know, it's funny. In looking at reading the bio, the first thing I thought to myself was, this is less of a character design because he is a human character. He doesn't have like multiple limbs. He doesn't have a strange, necessarily a strange body or anything. So this is more of a costume design. The only real change in his character is going to be like his build, which I'm actually thinking, because he is a bird-like character, even if he's going to be strong, I'm thinking about making him maybe a little bit less muscular and more kind of lanky and elongated. You know, like birds have very light bones. And I'm not saying that this guy's going to have light bones, but I am thinking about making him just see if I can make his physicality more bird-like before I begin working on the costume. But I think of character design as maybe when people have very distinct like the Hulk is something where his body is very different from a normal human being. When you have somebody who has close to normal human proportions, then it's less of character design and more of costume design, although both overlap a lot. Now, the first thing I thought of was, well, let's go to the inspiration. You had said that Gavin means hawk and Gawain means falcon in the description you sent me. I hope I didn't flip that, but if I did, we'll continue. The first thing I started doing was going online and looking for reference. And I don't know how important reference is to your process. I know for myself, for years, I never really used reference because no one showed me how to properly use reference. Most people think of reference as just, oh, find a photo or take a photo and then copy it. And that's not what reference is at all. What reference is you start with what you started with. You started with a character sketch. And hey, I see my buddy Joshua Kimball's in the chat. Hey, Josh, thanks for popping in there. Yeah, I'm trying to do more stuff where I'm looking at other people's work and interacting and just, giving feedback and seeing where I can be helpful. So this is a fun experiment we've been doing. So anyway, what I was saying, HJ, is that you started where I would usually start as well. Is I start internally. What do I think? What do I feel? What do I want? What comes out of my head? And sketch out a version of a character or a bunch of thumbnails. Then I look for reference once I know what I'm pursuing. So we know that this is a bird-themed character. We know that you also, we went back and forth. You gave me a follow-up in terms of information on him and said that he's a sort of a street level character, kind of like more like Daredevil or Spider-Man, as opposed to somebody who's like the X-Men with huge powers where they're destroying cities and blowing up buildings. So, I thought, okay, we know this about him. Now I believe you mentioned that you liked the idea of a bird-themed character who didn't fly. And I'm bringing that up because one of the things I was thinking about was I actually very immediately, one of the first things I thought of were like those kite suits that people will use for extreme sports where they are, let me invert this and make this a little bit bigger. Right now, I'm still sort of getting set up in a sense that I'm just kind of gathering reference for the elements that I think are going to be important for this. But one of the things I thought of was, those kite suits that people wear. But if this guy absolutely does not fly, then I suppose that the kite suit doesn't really matter. But I'm curious whether you think he's somebody who, is it more that you're open to the idea of him having a suit that allows him to fly, or like some sort of gliding suit? Or are you thinking he's a guy who just has a bird-themed costume, but he's not actually in the air? Because I mean, even Batman doesn't fly, but he is, but he's often in an aircraft like the Batwing, or he's gliding, he'll have a glider, or he'll just jump through the air and glide on the wings of his suit. So when I saw your original sketch, I was thinking something more like Batman in terms of him having a suit that is capable of him gliding. If that's not a direction you want to go, let me know. But I actually think that, you might be missing an opportunity there. Okay, no, he says, I'm definitely open to the flying suit. By the way, I see more people rolling into the chat. Thanks for popping in, guys. I see my buddy Vaughn there, industrial-minded artist. He said, sup, drawing hawks, nice. And Josh says, it's a good pod. Will probably be helpful for folks, kind of giving them art director experience. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for the feedback, guys. Let's see here. So the things that I was thinking about when I saw this guy was how, in terms of changing his costume, updating it, revising it, what's going to be that's one of the reasons why I was asking about sort of the motivations of what made him want to fight crime and what level of criminals he's going to be fighting, because that's also going to indicate the types of weapons he's going to need. It's going to indicate his fighting style. All of those things are going to influence his costume. um and they're going to influence his costume. They're going to influence the weapons he's going to carry. So besides just changing his body type, I was thinking, all right, what kind of and that's the other thing, the fighting style is probably the most important thing that will influence his costume. So now knowing that, one of the things I was thinking about was what types of weapons might he have. And I haven't had a chance to sketch it out yet, but that's what we're going to be doing here. But I was already thinking about if I can try to find a way to make talons into a weapon. Oh, this was an important thing. You had mentioned that while he does have the ability to actually control birds, he prefers not to. Like, he prefers to communicate with them, talk with them. He doesn't want to overtake them. The fact that you put that detail there is important, and it's great writing because it tells me something about his personality. That while he might be fighting people aggressively, hand to hand combat, he's not like the Punisher, where it's like he's got a war on crime and he's going to defeat his enemies at all cost. He sounds like he's a thoughtful, compassionate person. That leads me to think, like, one of the things I was thinking is that if he had a wingsuit, that he might have like blades that are like talons that would come out of the wings. I haven't started sketching that out yet, but I guess what I'm trying to get at is his level of physical violence. Like, Daredevil gets gritty and he gets bloody, but at the end he's using billy clubs and he's beating people. Batman is definitely not afraid to break people's bones, cripple them, and put them in the hospital. But he's not like Wolverine, where Wolverine is stabbing and slashing people, whether he kills them or not. So I do want to get a sense of how lethal you see him being, because from the way you described him to me, he seems more like he's in the vein of like Daredevil or Nightwing or Batman. He'll beat you up, he'll put you in the hospital, but he's not necessarily going to be slashing people. So let me know if that seems like that's in line with him. And one of the things I think you'll see in terms of like when we did the other video with Tyler is that the decisions about what happens to a character, how you build a character physically, are intrinsically linked. They're intertwined with the character's personality, their backstory, their current story, and the things they're going to do in the future. So who they are internally and how they behave is expressed in their costume and their equipment and their behavior. It's an external expression of their internal person. So that's why the level of violence that he's comfortable with committing is important to the costume design. Let's see here. See here. Josh also says it'd be rad to incorporate the beak of a bird, like heroes back in the day had on their masks. And that's another thing. It's the challenge here is how to not copy other existing bird themed characters, because obviously there's the Falcon from Falcon and Winter Soldier. Trying to think. I know there's other bird themed character. I mean, right now all I can think of is Birdman from the Alejandro Inarritu movie, which that was a pretty awesome costume design, even though it was influenced by Batman. Anyway, I'm taking a bit long getting to this because I'm just moving the reference around so that I can put it on one little layer, group it, and kind of turn it off and on or move it around as I need. So let me finish this and get started here. One other thing that I have in this group of images is I came across a picture of a falcon dive bombing, a peregrine falcon, and I was just like, that looks really, really cool. So I almost feel like that should be maybe one of his fighting moves, is him just dive bombing on people. So reference, I think, is very, very important to the entire process. In fact, let me duplicate and flatten this group of reference. Duplicate it. And the reason why I want to flatten it is so that I can leave it if I need to. I don't want to rename it. I want to flatten it. I have it there if I need to come back and revisit it, but I actually want to shrink this down. And let's take the image, your original sketch of Red Tail, and I'm going to shrink him down a little bit so I can put these kind of off to the side and I have room to work. Oh, there was something that I very specifically wanted to mention to you, HJ, which is that I'm working digitally because that's what's easiest for me. But I absolutely do not feel like the process that I'm using has to. You have to have it. You don't have to have a tablet to do, what we're doing here. Because I definitely don't want people to feel like they're restricted if they don't necessarily have a tablet or an input device on a desktop computer. When it comes to doing a lot of these sketches, yes, you can definitely draw on pen and paper, just draw on marker and Sharpie and work out silhouettes. But I also wanted to show when I used to draw a lot of my traditional comic book work. I would. By the way, I also see. I'm glad. See, this is the beauty of having a bunch of comic book folk in the chat, hanging watching the live stream. Vaughn says Vulture from Spider-Man. Josh also mentioned Harvey Birdman, attorney at law, and then there's Bird Girl. His is that his daughter or his niece? I can't remember. I only watched like the first 3 episodes, and I really liked Bird Girl. I just never got around to coming back to it. But anyway, point being, let me switch to the big screen just for a moment so I can show you. Got my ring light creating a big reflection there. So this is a pad of vellum. And all vellum is it's sort of like tracing paper, except for the fact that it is thicker than tracing paper. It's kind of like if you just had like normal copy paper that out of the photocopier. It's as durable as photocopy paper, but it's transparent like tracing paper. And it's not super expensive. Like I think this is like a pad of 50 sheets. And I think I paid somewhere around $8 for this. So it's not cheap, compared to like getting a pad of just getting a ream of paper. It's not cheap. The advantage is that the same way that I will draw on here and then put another layer on top and transform things and put another layer on top and change things, you can do all of this with just with pen and paper. You do not need a digital device, because I know that sometimes if people don't necessarily have the equipment that someone else is using, you might feel somehow limited. You are absolutely not limited. You can do everything I'm doing analog. In fact, except for the fact that the camera quality for my camera overhead isn't the level that I want to, and I didn't have time to properly set it up, but I was actually considering doing all of this analog just to prove a point. But I also, when I realized, oh wait, I should grab reference for all this, I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna have time to set up for all of that. But I felt like it was important to express that, it's not about having digital tools in terms of doing this kind of stuff. So the first thing I'm going to start with is, before really diving into the costume, I want to start with just having a simple generic body type. Kind of like a figure, almost like a silhouette to draw different costumes over. In fact, let me go to So the whole thing I'm trying to do right now is just work on what his proportions are going to be. Like I said, being kind of lanky. So I'm just starting with a simple stick figure so I can play with those proportions. The head he's got right now is way too big. Erase that. Let's see here. Ha! I see Gary Hodges in the chat. Hey Gary, how's it going? Thanks for popping in. Good to see you. Let's see here. Let me scroll back up because I think I missed a couple of comments. In terms of the questions I was asking about his level of, physical violence, HJ says, I don't think he'd be totally lethal as he wants to be a role model for young people, especially young people with abilities to compel them to be responsible. I'd say Nightwing level violence. Okay, good to know. And he says, I tried using references from the red tail bird, but I don't think I used enough to make it clear. Let's see here. And that's another thing is like that's one of like the whole design process is a process. I look at it more just sort of like, I'll start with what I feel emotionally. Like, what is it that I'm trying to get out of this character's look? And as I go through, I'll revise a little bit here, a little bit there. But yeah, finding the right way to implement the reference, I look at it more just sort of like I look at it and then I look for bits and pieces from the reference that I can apply and work in, as opposed to trying to copy the entire reference. Like, for instance, if you were trying to draw a building, you might decide, okay, well, you might find a building that has a style of windows, like in the front facing of the building that you like, but the building you're actually drawing, whereas the building you're inspired by is like a skyscraper, but you actually want to put it on like a flat kind of wide industrial factory looking building. So you may be like, all right, I'll take the window shape from this and apply it to this squat building. But then you look at another building that has like a bunch of like water towers and air vents and cooling stuff on the roof. And you might say, all right, well, I'm going to have a bunch of those little things. Like you might be looking from the ground level, but you see that there's a whole bunch of business on top that's peeking through. And maybe it's got antennas and radio signal towers on the top. And it's like you just sort of like grab bits and pieces. At least that's how I tend to use reference in two different ways. When I'm sketching and designing, it tends to be take bits and pieces. If I'm working on a specific illustration, then I will try to I'll try to create my own reference and make it as specific as possible. So like if I'm doing a character in a pose, I'll either take the pose myself, or I have these little plastic figures that I use that I pose and in the pose that I want to try and get the lighting right. Maybe if it's a costume, then I'll try to find photos of people in a similar type of costume, or I'll put on clothes, or I'll even maybe take a sheet and drape it to make it look like it's a cape. Maybe even clip the sheet to the wall so that I can have it draping out behind me so I can see what it would look like to have that particular, that particular piece of costume hanging off of me that way. So all I'm doing right here is I'm creating a very simple mannequin to build the character's design off of. That might be time for me to change my the tip of the pencil for my Apple Pencil here. It's getting a little wonky. So yeah, this is not a particularly detailed drawing. I'm going to use this as a base to try a couple of different figures on top of, or a couple of different costume designs on top of. So as you can see, and by the way, even though I'm giving you feedback, if you decide that your character really works better as more of a bulkier character versus a thin character, these are just suggestions. In the end, what's important is the character feels right for your story. Um, so definitely do not feel beholden to whatever advice I give. And I'm just going to switch to black here and just give them a strong outline. That way, whatever costumes I throw on top, that's so weird. What's going on with this? The layer's at full opacity. It's the only layer. Oh, I'm using the wrong brush. That's why. All right. There we go. I have a brush that is set to be pressure sensitive, but usually more often than not, I just pick whether I want to draw in light or dark. If I want something to be light, I just use a very light gray. Personal choice. It's not anything that's really like, oh, this is the way to do it. Anyway, as a starting point, I'm thinking lean, bird-like. I can already tell you that this whole thing, there's so much more to get into than I may even have time today. Because I'm thinking by the time I get done with designing the costume, I won't necessarily have even really gotten into designing his weapons. And I feel like the weapon thing is kind of important. But part of the reason for starting with this simple mannequin to draw the character on top of is that I noticed in your design, he's got pouches, he's got a belt, he's got knee pads, um, there's spurs coming off of his gloves or his gauntlet. And I kind of wanted to see what happens if you strip everything away and then start putting stuff on there. And it's not like he has an overly complicated costume. I think you kept your original design pretty simple, which is a good thing. You want the design to be simple. But I wanted to see what happened if I kind of stripped everything away and just said, all right, what am I going to put on this guy's body? And one of the reasons also why I wanted to look at kind of the flight suit is I was trying to think of what would be the kind of equipment that would be store bought that this guy could have in terms of like putting his costume together. Like what could he assemble from going to like sporting goods stores and outdoor equipment and industrial rugged equipment and maybe like going to an army surplus supply store? Like what would he put together to make it his own costume? Let's see here. I'm going back a little bit in the comments, but HJ says I draw digitally sometimes, but I'm still learning with it, and isn't as good as my traditional art style. Yeah, I mean, I will tell you today, like I've been using the iPad for a few years now. I still feel more comfortable with traditional art in terms of like what looks good to me, what feels like the best version of a drawing. It's far easier for me to get good results out of a traditional drawing than it is out of working digitally. It's just I've figured out enough tricks to be able to make changes quickly with digital, so it's become more convenient. But yeah, I think for a lot of people, traditional is still the thing that we love. Like yeah, Josh also says, "Yep, we all started analog. The tools aren't the thing; it's the skills which translate to anything." Yeah, I mean, I will tell you that a lot of the time, and other guys feel free to chime in. For me, I spend a lot of my time trying to get digital to do what I can already do analog. If that makes any sense. Analog is great for revising things, for changing things. Anytime you're doing work that's going to go through revisions and iterations, that's what digital is strong at. But the feeling of pen on paper, like, I mean, hell, Gary, I believe you still letter traditionally. Yeah, the whole all of that is like, digital is an extension of our analog skills. The fact that you're still working analog, keep at it. It will only help when you do use digital work. I'm sorry it took me so long to get to this comment. I see we've got a viewer here, Autumn Explorer. Says, hi there, Jeremy. Good to see you. What are you going over today? So we're going over HJ Mars sent in a character design for comic book character, his character, the Red Tail. And we're just looking at revising the character. It's not a full-on redesign. It's just sort of looking at him and seeing like where can we plus the costume, where can we change it, bring it up to a new level. And let's see here. And Vaughn, industrial minded artist, says, I highly recommend Dr. Natalia Bolo's book, Bird Anatomy for Artists. Vaughn also loves drawing birds, crows, various raptors. So that's something that we've talked about in the past. Let's see, James is in the chat, and yeah, he says feedback isn't necessarily objective. Very, very true. You always got to take people's feedback with a grain of salt. And he says too many brushes. That is something like I try to keep like my own set of brushes separate from the brush packs that I've purchased and the brush packs that come with the particular software that I'm like for Procreate. It comes with a wide assortment of brushes, and I try to keep that sort of separate. Like I just have like my own little folder of favorites is what I'm trying to say. I keep a folder of favorites for myself. So let's see here. Let's maybe just start with 3 different versions here. It looks like there's more room here than I thought. Let me merge these together. Pull this out a little bit. And then I'm going to put a layer on top of this. So I can just kind of scribble in a few different ideas and just see where it takes me. I mean, that's part of this is that it's a lot of exploration. Let's see here. HJ says, I'll check that book out. I have to draw a lot of birds when I'm at the stage to make a red tail comic book. Let's see here. James says some good tips, good poses. Thank you, James. Let's see here. HJ says, I'm really interested in hearing what colors you'd recommend. Well, what's funny is I think normally I will spend a lot of time just working on black and white graphic design and then just come down to adding colors afterwards. But maybe we can jump ahead and just throw some, as opposed to coloring the entire costume, maybe look at a couple of color explorations. Let's see here. Yeah, James says, I've gotten feedback that I didn't agree with before. I wasn't used to harsh critiques at the time. Yeah, some people, I don't know, they feel like they're doing you a favor by giving you tough love. Whereas I always look at it like it's never about telling someone they're bad. It's always about how can we elevate things. That's the way I look at it. That's what a good critique should do is say, here's a place where you can get to, like, I see what you're trying to do. Let's see if we can do it better. That's how I look at criticism. That's how I feel it should be. But I mean, hey, that's my personal critique of critiques. Some more recommendations. Vaughn also says, for the human figure, I really like Robert Beverly Hale's masterclass in figure drawing and Glenn Villepeu's manual. Walt Reed on the figure is nice as well. Nice character idea, by the way. Let's see here, which I agree. I think it's a pretty cool character. Let's see here. Yeah, James says there's a tangibility to traditional that you don't get with digital. Definitely agreed. And Gary says, I have worked mostly digital for years and years, but there's still things I have to draw by hand and scan because I can't get it to look right digitally. That's a good point. For some reason, I thought that you were still lettering traditional. I can't remember why that popped into my head. But yeah, the digital has just become one of those things where it's useful for getting stuff done quicker. And hey, Tyler, good to see you popping in. Tyler popped in to say hi. Harmless Horrors there. All right, so let's get into this. All right, you mentioned color. So let me see. I have a layer that's on top. Instead of going in and full on coloring this whole suit, let's start with just looking at the reference here and maybe starting with some swatches. And by swatches, I just mean blocks or blobs of color. Now I see that on the Peregrine Falcon, that yellow is not going to be the dominant color, but I really like that. Let me go with a slightly darker orangey yellow because I think it'll show up on the screen better. Let's try this. So maybe an orange and the Peregrine Falcon colors are nice, but I also don't want to make it exactly like the Blue Falcon, who is another bird themed character. Um, let's go with maybe a gray that's maybe a cool gray that has a little bit. I'm going to try and make it a little bit more blue, but not super blue. So maybe say blue, gray, and hmm, then maybe tan. Some possible. So this is me just looking at the colors that are in that very first picture up in the upper left. I'm just looking at the colors of that bird and saying, all right, that's a possible color combination. Then looking at the other hawk, maybe looking at this one here. So I'm thinking maybe red, brown, and black as another color combo. That's too red. That needs to be more brown. Let me desaturate, move towards orange. Maybe lighter. Another thing is I realized the first set of colors that I did, there's not enough contrast there. They're all pretty light colors. So there needs to be like maybe a dark color, a light color, and an accent, and a really vivid accent color. So that's an easy way to start in terms of blocking, figuring out character designs, is saying, all right, you're gonna have a dark color, a light color, and a vivid accent color. And this color combo also kind of relates to that reference of the sky suit, but since that's a man-made object, I'm not gonna focus on that one too much. Um, so I'm thinking this brown and black and red is kind of like a combination of these two birds. But I feel like you could also go one more where you've got a dark brown, a light brown. I'm not really sure what the accent color would be. Maybe dark brown, light brown, and then kind of white or an off white. So let's see what happens if we go with like a really, really dark. Whoops, I did not want to get rid of that. I want to keep that. Let's go with, let's see here. Also in the chat, Gary says, I do the onomatopoeias by hand sometimes, but no, the dialogue is a font. Gary don't have time for hand lettering. I feel you. I feel you. Let's see here. HJ says, I only knew the red-tailed hawk existed when my neighbor showed me and my dad his red tail. And then I got the idea for the character. Let's go. It's good. Hell, you know what? You might be able to use a detail like that in your origin story. Maybe there's something where before he's given away to the or to the orphanage, maybe his parents have some sort of encounter with a hawk, or maybe there's a person at the orphanage who's a bird keeper. I don't know. Let's see. Like maybe there's a cranky janitor at the orphanage that is mean to all of the kids, but for some reason the kid some reason he's got a soft spot for your character because he's kind of an outcast, and then he kind of sneaks up to the roof and finds out the guy has like this whole like coop up there where he keeps birds. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here. Writing is a very personal and intimate thing, so it's nice to take bits and pieces of feedback that people give you, but the way that you process it should totally be your own. Let's see here. HG also says, one thing I love about the reference photos you gathered is that there's something about the middle bottom layer bird having one arm slightly different color would emphasize the store-bought aspect. Yeah, that is also an idea. I mean, I'm honestly not sure how much of that is it really being different colors, or how much of it is the fact that more sun might be shining through. Like, I think what's happening is that you're getting more sunlight through the left wing than you are through the right wing, because or you know what I mean? The right wing is getting more sun. The left wing probably isn't, because the left wing is probably angled down more. That might be why it looks like there are two different colors. But that doesn't mean that you can't necessarily be inspired by that to still make it something where there's two different colors. See here. What else was I thinking? Oh yeah, dark brown, light brown. Let's try a very, very dark brown. Then a light reddish brown. And then maybe an off white yellow color. I mean, this kind of goes away from the whole thing of having one accent color be vivid, but you don't need to figure it all out at once. So this color palette is sort of inspired by the bottom row first bird. And by the way, this is just a good exercise in general. If you're sitting there trying to figure out how you want to color a character's costume, just open a bunch of references, look at a bunch of photos, and don't worry about what the thing in the photo is. Just look at the colors and see if you can find a color scheme that you really like. Now, looking at the bird here, the falcon that's diving, I really like that color scheme of gray, dark gray, and yellow. And there's a little tip of bright blue, which same bird, you can see how the beak goes from from just blue to like a really vivid blue, even though the rest of it is gray. I really, really like that. The only thing is trying to figure out how to make sure it's not too close to the Blue Falcon is an old Hanna-Barbera cartoon character. So way before your time. To be honest, he was old when I was a kid. But sometimes just by instinct, we end up picking character colors or schemes that feel a little bit too close to existing looks. So it's something to maybe research and just make sure that you're not accidentally because it's not copying if you weren't looking at them when you were making up your own, but it's still worthwhile to come back to an existing character and say, all right, is this a little bit closer than I'd like? So I'm going to add a little bit, damn it, I'm going to add a little bit of blue to this gray. So it is kind of close to the gray that I originally had there. In fact, this should be lighter. Let's go up here. Light gray, just a hint of blue. I almost feel like this would be the base of the costume. And then that dark gray. And as I'm changing these colors, I'm also going up and down in warmth. So it's not just light gray and dark gray, but I'm making the darker gray also cooler. And that is not something that you can necessarily calculate. I'm doing it by feel. And the way that doing things by feel works is you put a color down and you're like, should this be warmer? Should this be cooler? You just kind of like you try different versions until you get what feels right. Because sometimes you can go nuts trying to intellectualize the process and say, oh, I have to follow these steps. Um, anyway, for now, these are a couple of different color possibilities for you to look at. I'm going to start by using the last one that's there. Let's see here. Yeah, HJ also says, good idea with the beak colors. The red tail also has that, but on its talons, which is a cool detail. And we've got a viewer on Twitch. Remarkable car. Let's see here. It looks like that is somebody offering some spam. Yeah, we will just remove that. I need to read these before I start clicking on. All right. Never mind the spam. All right, so let's say, in fact, what we can just try out a couple of different color schemes with each of these guys. I feel like I would probably be wise to put a new layer on here. So let's say as a starting point, let's put this layer underneath these figures. I should go in here and just erase some of these lines first. These construction lines. Kind of in the way. I would have been wise to just do the black lines on a separate layer. But you know what? You live, you learn. So what happens when you're making shit up as you go along. Well, I mean, I'll tell you, I'm gonna do a little bit of color on the first one, but I'm gonna switch back to black and white on the second because in the end, working out the costume details to me feels a little bit more important than deciding the color right away. Let's see here. Oh, I see Amaris is in the chat. Says, um, I've been Mia for a while. Well, Mia, good to see you. Or MIA. MIA, you've been Mia. Amaris, good to see you. She says, I'm Miss Foreman now. Congratulations on the nuptials. Hope the wedding was fantastic. Let's see. It says, I'm keeping my same name on YouTube, but went on overseas vacation for your honeymoon. I hope you guys had a fantastic time. Congratulations again. Hopefully you got to both relax and see some interesting sights. I know sometimes with vacations it's a challenge because trying to see all the quote unquote sights and historical things, you end up like running around so much. You're like, I'm not enjoying being on vacation because I'm like having a schedule to keep all the time. Whereas sometimes vacations where you're just sitting on a beach with a drink in your hand, that's all you want to do. I find the best vacations are when you kind of split the difference and you maybe like every other day you've got something to see that's like a site or a historical thing. And then you've got a day where you're just relaxing and hanging around and doing nothing. All right, enough of that messing around and cleanup stuff. Let's get back to blocking in some of these colors. Actually, the whole thing of him having that costume where, he's got the cape kind of behind him, I'm wondering if it makes more sense to be, hmm, now I'm trying to incorporate more of what you have in the actual costume, in your costume. So I'm trying to go back to that and say, all right, let's give him a wingsuit. Now, the interesting thing with the wingsuit is that this would obviously interfere with the punching and kicking. So maybe in terms of what's going on, the part between his legs would be necessary in terms of allowing him to fly, but it would be problematic in terms of street fighting. So maybe it's something where the part that's back there, that becomes more like a cape that pulls up as opposed to hanging all the way down. Or maybe it's something that changes shape. Because it also seems like you've got a cape design. Like I'm looking at the wingsuit thing, but he seems like he has something that's a bit in between a wingsuit and a cape. You know what? We can solve that later. For now, let's go with the wingsuit design, knowing that this is going to have to be worked out function. Like, what does it look like when he's fighting if he's got that thing that's draped there? There will have to be some sort of solution. But let's switch now to maybe making his entire. Now, I know that this particular peregrine falcon just has, like, it's almost like he's wearing a hood, and it's the black is just around there like a mask. But this guy has it going all the way around his head down, it stops at his chest. So as a starting point, let's see how it looks if he's maybe got it coming down like this. And again, I got to go in here and erase a little bit of that because I'm trying to think of how to make the yellow look like without giving him a yellow face. I mean, it could be something where he's got a yellow face mask. You know what? Hell, why not? That's the whole point, is just try and wait. I just want to make sure I didn't paint on the wrong layer. All right, everything's still good. Maybe it's kind of like, I don't know if you're familiar with Mr. Miracle. He's an old Jack Kirby character, and he has a big yellow hood mask, but his face is completely masked, even though you can see his mouth through the opening of the mask. So maybe as opposed to you have him with sort of a Batman face cutout, maybe he has an entire face mask, almost like a ski mask, covering his whole face. But in that covering, he's got maybe he's got something that is kind of like a beak. That might be a little too big. So now the idea, this is where the reference comes back in again, is looking at this and saying, all right, like you've got a shoulder harness for him. So we can have that shoulder harness coming down there. But I mean, actually, a lot of this is really just using what you already have and adapting it so it feels more bird-like. Like you have a part where his shoulders are sort of like covered. Those kind of lightning bolt aren't marks that you have that are like kind of cut lines. It's sort of like what you're already doing. It's just a matter of enhancing that and trying to say, all right, how can I make this maybe feel more bird-like? Instead of putting that there on his body, how about we just make, for now, this entire inside section, the wing section, maybe making all of that blue, like the darker blue gray. And then maybe coming back in, but no, that's the yellow. Then coming back in with the light and just adding a couple of streaks in here. Just 1, 2, 3, 2. Because when you add little details like this, you don't want it to be something where every time you draw this character, it's a pain in the ass. So just saying 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2, 3. Like on each of these sections, giving him that. So let's see here. Amara says, we basically went without a plan. We just knew we wanted to go to Japan and spend time at museums or on the beach. Sounds nice. Sounds nice. Yeah, my wife and I haven't been able to go on a trip in a while. That's the kind of thing we would love to do. Let's see here. All right. Let's see here. Maybe a splash of color in the middle. I feel like I want to be judicious about where to put the yellow. So let's say just making his gloves yellow so that they're like talons. In fact, again, going back to erase those gray lines I put in there. Let's see here. HJ says, I love that design. The M. It says, the Mr. Miracle idea is also great. In fact, let me come back in here and just give him a little gray slit for the mouth just to indicate that he's got that beak shape. He's got a mouth. And I'm trying to decide, let's see here. You know what? This might be interesting, is to take the exact eye that the falcon has. So giving him a yellow outline, but the eye itself to be black, like almost like black goggles over the suit. So imagine that this is like a whole yellow area around the face. Hang on. Just want to make it a little bit more angled. In fact, that's an easy thing to do. Just angle like that, angle like this. So like imagine that these are like stripes on the surface of the hood, but then within the hood, let me switch to black. And then maybe he's got goggle lenses. Those are too close together. Let's see here. I'm just going back and sort of looking for inspiration in terms of like capturing just the right eye shape. I think that needs to cut down a little bit more. Yeah, I think you're gonna have to play with this a little bit, but the idea of having the eyes like full on look almost exactly like a peregrine falcon's, where it's a black circle. I mean, now we're getting in pretty close here, you guys. I mean, for me, this looks pixelated as all shit because I'm zoomed in, but it's probably smoothing it out for you guys a little bit. In fact, let me grab a little dab of white highlight here. I don't know. Just a thought. Now, what was I saying? Where were we going with this? Let's see here. So maybe give him. Yep, I knew it was going to happen eventually. I was going to draw on the wrong layer. Oh well, life goes on. All right. Let's give him. Be a broad belt. Now there is a character that Alan Moore's created called the Peregrine. Um, it was in a comic book series called the Top 10. That's another character that I would look at just to make sure you're not doing something similar. Like I think that the color scheme of the Peregrine is a lot more like the red tail hawks that I have here on the second tier than it is like this blue and gray. But we're already at past an hour here. So I kind of want to jump into a little bit of suggestions in terms of the body here, and then maybe touch a little bit on possible weapons and equipment for him to carry. And then I think from there, that's just a rough start of things to do and explore with this character. Let's see here. Let's see here. Vaughn says, "Have you guys ever played the game Sly Cooper? I bring it up because he has a cane with a hook on it, and he uses that agility tool weapon. Maybe you can do something like that for bird talons." Yeah, I was gonna do a little bit of playing with the costume some, and then get into weapons real quick. But the color part that we jumped into, I jumped into that specifically because you asked about it. But normally, the way that I prefer to work is after I have that silhouette, is to come in and say, all right, what do we want to do with the body here? For instance, you gave us a nice cut like design line. Hang on, let me make this a little bit smaller here. You give us like a nice design line for what's going up to his shoulder. And what I'm thinking is to try and change that to look more like bird feathers. So yeah, I'm changing tactics a little bit here, but that's because for me, honestly, I will tell you that I am capable of doing color work. I can execute decent color work, but I'm much more comfortable, especially when it comes to design, thinking in black and white. So that's a personal choice for me. I like to sort of work out the silhouettes in that sense before going into color work. So I wanted to jump back to what I would do in terms of like, all right, maybe playing with different thicknesses of the belt. Maybe he's got a really thin belt, maybe he's got a really thick belt. Trying different things. Now I see that let me see here. maybe have a feeling as if there's like this is part of a wing coming down, even though it's going to end in talons. And by the way, I'm not sure the best way to execute it, but I really do like the detail that you already put on there with him having he's got like one point on his boots, having that be as a talon. And I haven't done any looking at the detail of the boots at all. Like I noticed that you've got knee pads for him for fighting. It might well be that instead of having the spurs that you have coming off here, maybe instead there's a band around the elbow and he's got like elbow pads. And the elbow, what I'm about to draw would be facing directly behind him. It wouldn't be something that would be visible from the side, but maybe he's just got like one, like the same way that you've got those Batman style spurs. Maybe he's just got like one or two spurs coming off of his elbow. And actually, maybe they're a little bit duller, so they're more like spikes that are gonna damage, but not necessarily. They'll puncture the flesh, but they're not gonna rip your guts out. And hell, maybe he just has claws. See, this is the reason. Like, I'm not again. I know you were asking about color. When I'm in this stage, what I'm really trying to do is just trying to add different pieces and see how they feel. Maybe the belt. Maybe he's gonna have an insignia on his belt. Maybe not. I'm not sure. Um, and this is actually an interesting idea: is him having gloves that have claws, as opposed to him having a weapon unto itself. But let's take the bands that you put on his leg. Let's just say, all right, whatever the claw type weapons that he has, maybe they are mounted on his hip. Let's see here. And HJ says, I like the bold black parts of the costume a lot. Says, that's a really cool idea, all of it. Thank you. Well, but again, this is one of those things where I would come back and maybe everything that's black here might end up being brown, like it might from this color scheme up there. Or maybe it would be black and then the brown would be the main, and then you still got some red accents. Let's see here. Now, to make him feel a little bit more grounded, I think what I would do probably for the knee pads is I would look. This is another place where I would grab reference and try to find really like just what are some normal store bought knee pads. And then from there, try to figure out if there's ways to make them stand out or feel more part of this world. Because maybe that's something that like it looks like you just put sort of a shield shape on his knee, and I can tell that that's what you were doing, was doing a knee pad. um Instead of trying to come up with crazy bird-like knee pads, maybe this is a place where he just has a physical detail that you're like, oh, okay, it's knee pads, that's all. um Boots are another thing where I would go and look at a few different boot styles. Um, this might sound like a bit much, but looking at like some hot topic or some sort of like strappy boots, like I'm trying to dance around it, but let's say stuff that has sort of an S&M bondage theme to it, which I'm not telling you go look at bondage artwork. I am absolutely not saying that because I believe you are still in high school. But what I'm saying is that superhero costumes and leather costumes, that kind of get up, um, have a lot of crossover. And maybe it's just a way if you just look up leather costumes, that I think would be with your safe search on that you might find stuff that is not too inappropriate, but might still give you something that's a little bit edgier. I'm just taking like, for instance, what you did. You have two black lines there. I'm just changing the position of them so that I'm moving them up higher in the calf and then adding another one in the bottom. So it's more like I'm taking what you already did and just trying to make it feel a little bit more stylized. And maybe put like a line going up the middle of them. I don't know. And these don't have to just be, you know, lines for the sake of lines. This could be that these are both buckles. Like they're straps on the let me put those more towards the outside. These can just be straps on the buckles on the boots, if that makes any sense. And generally, the shoes are not something that you draw a lot of attention to, but the fact that he's got these talons, maybe you want to consider giving him the full on three talons and just say, all right, it's a full on bird costume. And maybe there's one in the middle that's a little bit more aggressive, and the other two are almost more like just shorter spikes. But literally, you're like, all right, he really is going to feel like a bird. So these are just things to think about. Like this, to me, this is a starting point. I would have this sheet of reference open and I would just draw like, who knows, like maybe 12 of these where I'm just doing little thumbnails and I'm just sketching and I'm trying out different angles of the costume. Now, when it comes to going back to the kite suit, let's switch back to a gray or maybe a brown here. You know what? Let's keep it black and white just because it'll be less confusing. But I'm going to go to a gray color here. And now with this, let's say that we don't want to give it the ridges that Batman's costume has, but let's say that we were just to indicate feathers. So I want to. This is a challenging thing, particularly if you don't want it to be a difficult costume to draw. You want to make something that's going to be easy to draw all the time. Is to very simply say, all right, I want these to feel like feathers. I don't want them to feel like spikes, but you also don't want to have to spend a lot of time really getting them just right. You want it to be something that you can just kind of knock out quickly. Because that is the other side of this. If you're doing costume design, you don't want this to be something that in every panel there's tons of detail you have to draw. You want to think about it's almost like you're sculpting in the sense of you're adding a bunch of stuff on top of the suit. And then you go through and you start taking stuff away to say, all right, if I have to draw like, you know, a dozen panels of this character, If I'm trying to get out a whole page and I'm drawing like 5 shots of him on one page, is this guy going to be a pain in the ass to draw in every page? Like you can already take one panel and say, all right, well, I'm going to do one panel in silhouette. That still leaves maybe 4 more drawings of the character. You want to make sure his mask isn't so complicated that's going to be a pain in the ass to draw. You want to make sure his suit, his boots, you want his costume to imply detail without being overly detailed. In film, that's a different thing because when in film costume design or even in CG, well, it depends on how much processing power the machines that are rendering the costumes are. But in film, you have a department that actually has to build the costume, and then the concerns are: is it going to be comfortable for the actor? Are they going to be able to move and see and perform safely? But if all of those things are met, if the costume has a lot of detail on it, as long as it's not distracting, visually distracting to the viewer, that is not necessarily a. You can have a detailed costume, but in comics, when you're drawing every single panel, you do not want to make a costume that's so detailed it's a pain in the ass. So you add pieces, then you take pieces away. You do a bunch of poses of the character. You do sketches of him jumping off of rooftops, fighting with people, drinking coffee, pulling the costume off because he's home. You know, and that's another thing. Is he the type of guy? That's another thing that's good to know. Is he the type of guy that's going to have his costume stuffed into a backpack or underneath his shirt? Is he the type of guy who has to go home and go to home base to put his costume on? Um, is he going to have maybe a stripped down version where it's just like the cowl and maybe a simple bodysuit that's in the colors of the character? I mean, I will tell you that I still think that the Talon weapon is a cool thing, but I like this idea of just giving him claws, and that's the main thing. So it's like maybe he's not Wolverine claws, not slashing people apart, but who knows? Maybe it's something where he's got some sort of tranquilizer in his talons, and his whole thing is like he just weakens people and they get groggy, and then he can just punch them and knock them out. That's something where he's it's something where he's using the claws to get something into people's systems to weaken them. I don't know. Let's see here. So your HJ says, I love the idea of longer talons and talons on his hands. It definitely helped with scaling buildings. And that was a funny thing. Like I was also wondering in terms of the flight, like if he's gliding, he's not going to be able to just jump off of the ground and then be up in the air. But maybe something where he jumps, grabs onto a building, jumps up again, and like scales. Like I was thinking about the idea of having like catapults in his shoes or something to fling him up in the air. Like how to get. That's a whole nother thing. You might want to look at how birds take off from the ground and say, how do I design a way? That's a design problem for you. Maybe he never does take off from the ground and he always has to be catapulted into the air, but maybe he doesn't. Maybe he actually develops a system that allows him to do a running takeoff from the ground. Watch some videos of birds and watch what they're doing when they're running and flapping or when they're taking off from a standing still, like when a bird is taking off from the ground, not when they're just falling off of a building or out of a tree and start flying. How does a bird get going? Things to look at, and that may completely change how his costume is designed, or at least change his footwear and his footgear. So the last thing before I jump into really quick, just a quick pass on weapons. One thing I was going to say is I noticed you've got his name as an R, small on his belt and his chest. I don't think that that's a bad move, but I wanted to experiment with the idea of him possibly. I mean, you don't want to copy Robin from Batman and Robin. You don't want to copy necessarily that costume, but I was wanted to play with the idea of him maybe having a giant R on his chest. And this is just, playing around with different stuff, seeing how it looks. And also, while we're at it, I did want to look. This is something worth looking at, is maybe just trying to make a helmet for him that is shaped like one of these hawks' heads. So I was going to that was the other thing, was changing both that look of, him having one giant logo. And then I'm going to change this from a straight on shot to a profile. And I'm going to make this sort of a mass, more of a mass sticking out. I'm going to have to zoom out a little bit so I can see it's going to be harder for you to see what I'm drawing because it's going to be really tiny. But I kind of want to look at the reference while I draw this. And now this is definitely getting into more of that Michael Keaton Birdman area. So that's another place to look at it and say, all right, am I going too much into a direction that's copying something that's existing? Go back to this layer and erase more of that stuff in here. Kind of need to give myself a little bit of room to make up, to sort of reinvent the shape of his head here. It almost feels like Darth Vader with a helmet that big. Come in like that, and then maybe erase a little bit out so we've got like his mouth is maybe mostly covered just underneath. Schmucky's got like a very, it's a little bit of a contrast from the idea of him being slender, because this helmet's a little bit bulky. But maybe there's a way to blend it with the rest of his suit. Let's see what happens if we maybe just let his shoulders be shoulders. You know what? Why not? Let's undo this. Instead, what if we actually full on give him bird like shoulder pads? I mean, a lot of this stuff, if I were doing this traditionally, I'd probably be drawing it with a Sharpie. Just go in with a marker and just draw silhouettes. And I would probably also not make them particularly precious. Like, I'm drawing slower because I'm talking to you guys and I'm talking through the process. But if I were drawing this on my own, I would try to make a bunch of these really quickly and not be precious about any of them. So yeah, now he's starting to feel a little bit more like a creature of the night. And maybe just have these go black the rest of the way down. In fact, maybe it's interesting to, let's say we've got the knee pads there, keep that running from the previous design, but just have it so once you get down past his knees, the whole thing just becomes silhouette. Or maybe even above that. Maybe, hmm, we go back to this layer and just erase some of this. So it can really just disappear into the silhouette here. And again, this doesn't need to be black. This could all be a dark gray or a dark brown. And I think that the whole thing of his body sort of disappearing into the silhouette of the wing shape could still work. And you get all of that, and then you still maybe have talons at the end of his boots. And let's see what happens if we do give him particularly long claws. I don't think that this is the right way to go, but I think the whole point of doing thumbnails is to experiment. So, what I highly encourage is if you have an idea and you think, oh, wait, no, that's not a good idea, the ones that you think are not a good idea are the ones you should sketch out. Because honestly, it's usually the bad executions that lead to the real breakthroughs, to thinking something differently. So these are just a couple of different takes on the costume. And like I say, for all of this, there's starting points. None of these are this is what you should make your character design into. They're all starting points to just start. There, it's more like I'm trying to show you my way of how I start exploring. Because for me, the fun part is drawing like 12, 20 different thumbnails of these characters. Like these are probably more detailed than thumbnails. Like my thumbnails are super rough, super loose, but I would draw a whole bunch of like pages of sketches like this before I find one that I really like. Because I find that when I do the first couple, are probably the least innovative. And then I'm like, well, let me draw 5 more. And then I start getting to some interesting places. And by the end of when I get around version 7 or 8, it's like, now I'm getting to just stupid. These are ridiculous. I'm trying weird shit just to try it. Like you could just decide, hey, I'm just going to design a bird suit of armor. Like he's just a big armored bird, which, hey, try it, see how it looks. And then when I get to the end, that's when I feel like things get interesting. That's when I feel like it's version 9 and 8 and 9 and 10. That's when I start coming up with something that truly feels like I haven't seen before, or this really feels like a different take on this type of character, this type of design. So push with it, run with it. And Wingtunes is in the chat, says looking good. Thank you, Wingtunes. I appreciate it. Let's see here. HJ Mars also says, I think that's really cool. Reminds me of Stan Lee's Just Imagine Batman. And he says, unrelated, what's your opinion of the news on the new Hellboy film? I didn't know that there was news on the new Hellboy film. I actually haven't even seen the one with David Harbour, the guy from Stranger Things. And that's not because I'm dissing on it. I miss a lot of movies because I'm spending time trying to make things. I actually really want to see that movie because I like the actor from that one, but I did not know that there was new news. So let me know what the news is. Meanwhile, one last thing is I'm just going to really quickly say, all right, what could his weapon possibly look like? So let's say he's got something that as a starting point, I'm imagining just a billy club that has claws on it instead. So, here's his hand. Something similar to Daredevil's billy club. But with 1 hook, 2 hook, 3 hook. And maybe it's something where it starts out. Well, first off, I can already tell you that it being bird themed, the first thing I think of is, well, let's curve this more. Instead of it being a straight billy club, let's give it a nice curve. Maybe it's got another hook at this end. Already it's starting to change as I sketch it out. So he's got little screws here. So it starts out like one blade, then the other blades snap out. Another thought that I had is maybe he's got something that maybe he's got something that's kind of like a throwing star. But it's shaped like the talons of a bird. Almost like a bolo. So it's almost like they are flying handcuffs that are painful. So maybe they can fly into you and hit you. Maybe they fly into you and slice you. Maybe they fly into you and they just grapple around you like the talons of a bird. They just come out and scoop you up, snatch you up. Something that I would also recommend. Just go on YouTube and watch videos of hawks and falcons attacking their prey. Just watch them attack. Try to base his fighting style on that. Because I will tell you, the thing when I was looking through reference, I was doing this right before we started, this image of the peregrine falcon dive bombing, I feel like that is such a cool image. And if you can somehow work that into either his fighting style or maybe even designing a weapon that looks like that, that's another thing. It's another idea, is a dive bomb weapon. Just really quick. Dive bomb. So, I feel like we barely scratched the surface. We've got to wrap it up here. But honestly, this is like, to me, this character is interesting enough that you could spend a lot of time working out and revising, revamping. And like I said, the idea that you can just make little color swatches there and then just try coloring different versions of the character with each of these different color combinations up there. The color swatches, working out the silhouette, working out his helmet, revising the costume around different fighting styles, around watching how birds attack. These are all like, you could spend weeks designing this character, and I think you could have a lot of fun with it. It looks like a really cool project. You know what? Yeah, like you said. First off, on the Hellboy stuff, they said that the next Hellboy movie is called Hellboy: The Crooked Man, and has a younger Hellboy as the main character. Set in the 50s, the actor is Jack Kesey, who played Black Tom in Deadpool 2. What's interesting? I mean, here's the thing. I don't really react much to movie news. I just wait until I see the trailer, and if the trailer looks like something I'm interested in, then I see the movie. It's not that I think it's bad to be interested in the Hollywood stuff. I just usually don't have time. I don't have the mental bandwidth to keep up with what's going on. But I do love Hellboy. And it sounds like I'll give any Hellboy movie a try, unless people are telling me right away, they're like, oh, no, don't do it. Otherwise, I'm like, yeah, I'll check it out. I like Hellboy. I like comic book movies. I like horror. I like fantasy. See here, HJ says, I love that weapon design. It's great. It says it would be awesome also if it is extendable, so he can use it as a staff, a spear, a club. Well, there we go. You are off and running. You've got all this. You've got some inspiration to run with. Don't let the reference that I put on here be the endpoint. Let this be a starting point. Grab open up just a folder and grab tons of reference. Grab reference for different types of just suits that people wear. Reference for birds, for color schemes. Reference for like I said, watching video of birds, raptors attacking prey. Hell, grab reference of raptors fighting with each other. I'm sure that occasionally birds do get into conflict with each other, or they're fighting. That might be interesting as well to see that fighting style. But take all of that and use that and just put it in the stew, so that your character isn't based on one source. It's informed by a lot of different things in the world. Some that are costumes and that are gear and equipment that maybe military, that service special forces people might wear. Military gear versus costume versus leather costumes, like we were talking about before. Like a whole variety of sources to kind of build and invent and make something that's truly your own. So I hope this was useful for you. I will post this actual image, this sheet as it is, on Instagram. So and I'll post it in the whatever it is, the community tab on YouTube, so you can grab the whole sheet if you want. And again, if anyone wants to check out HJ's work, he's the HJ Mars on Instagram. But I hope this was useful, helpful for you. I hope it's inspiring and that you take the character and run from here and do awesome stuff with it. Let's see here. Wingtunes says, no problem. I have a problem drawing bodies. Well, I've got tons of videos on the subject, and I'll probably be revisiting some figure drawing next week if I'm not back on some illustration. If you have any stuff that you want me to take a look at, you can always just tag me on Instagram. It's just Jeremy B on Instagram, and I could try doing a draw over of that as well. If you have problems drawing bodies, is it more like, is it proportion? Is it anatomy? Is it volume? You know, we're wrapping up the live stream here, but for whenever you want me to give you some feedback, if you can be specific about what are the things that you find the hardest, maybe think about those questions, and yeah, we can talk about it in a future live stream. And for, hey, anyone who's watching who isn't subscribed, mash that subscribe button, hit that share button, share it with folks, help me get the word out, help grow the channel. I greatly appreciate it. And HJ says, it was incredibly useful, Jeremy. Thank you so much for this. You're incredible and very knowledgeable. I humbly say thank you. I have a hard time taking praise, but I do appreciate it. So you're more than welcome. I'm happy to help. I'm happy to give back to my fellow artists. On that note, we're going to wrap up this stream here. This has been a long one, but I hope everyone else has found it just as interesting. Again, if you'd like to get more of this, you can become a Patreon subscriber at patreon.com/GERIMI. We do 2 Patreon exclusive live streams a month that are like, 2.5, 3 hours or more long. So a lot more of this. And on those, we have a voice channel open so we can just talk directly while I'm drawing. You can share stuff on the Discord chat and I can bring it up. We do a thing called Art Book Study Group where I dig into some of the best art books around and we just try to suck out all the knowledge we can. You also get access to a Patreon exclusive Discord server, get access to an online digital archive where you can read my comic books, all of that for as little as $2 a month. Head on over to patreon.com/GERIMI. It's patreon.com/Jeremy. If you would like to get a free digital sketchbook, work in progress animated GIFs, blog posts about what I'm reading, what I'm watching, what's inspiring me creatively, you can sign up for my free monthly newsletter at newsletter.jeremy.net. And if you would like to purchase physical copies of my comic books or if you read digitally on Comixology or Kindle, Comixology is going away apparently, you can go to amazon.jeremy.net. You can pick up books like my first graphic novel, Eye of the Gods. It is a standalone psychological thriller. It's about a man he is cursed with visions he cannot control, hence all the eyebrows. He's drowning in visions. Get it? You can pick up my most recent project, Morning Star. It is Lucifer's Fall from Heaven, told as a Western. It's an 8-issue series. Volume 1 contains issues 1 through 4. Volume 2 contains issues 5 through 8, the conclusion to the series. Both have extensive back matter, character designs, script excerpts, thumbnails, photo reference, and more. I basically show you how I put the entire book together. Check all that out. Also, if you are in the LA area, I will be at WonderCon on March 24th through 26th, booth E23 in Artist Alley. Come by, say hi, pick up some art, pick up some comics. Look forward to seeing you. All right, guys, thank you so much for hanging out. This has been super fun, super interesting, super entertaining. I always like hanging out with you guys. Hopefully this is inspiring and entertaining to you. Hey, I see Amar made it, just swung in by the end. Good to see you, man. Yeah, it was a great stream. We did some character redesigns. The replay will be up very shortly. So, all right, guys, thanks so much. That's it for now. Go be creative.